This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
You're very disciplined and you're a hard worker, and we will talk about that now because you told us you have 4 jobs currently. I'll try to rattle them down because this is it's intense. So job number 1, strategic consultants, helping tech companies telling their story. Job number 2, public speaking. Job number 3, teaching at ASU and Chapman Universities. Job number 4, we mentioned that, writing for Forbes with a focus on Metaverse, Web3, AI, XR. And then, of course, adjacent to that, hosting the podcast could be called a job 5 with over 10,000 downloads a week. And you told us in our prep call, and I'll use this quote from you because I think it's epic. Quote, love talking about shit that doesn't exist because you can't be wrong.
Well, that is true. I mean, when you write about technology, your column from 2 weeks ago is old news. So, who's going to go back 5 years and say, oh, in 2017, you said this, and now it's 2024, and you were full of shit. Although I will say, if we went back to my predictions, I would say I was pretty much on the money because I said that XR was going to follow the development pattern of the personal computer, which took 20 years. So we're not quite there yet. 2030s, I think we'll start to see some real progress, but the devices out there continue to be developer kits, if you will. That is, a preliminary device that allows you to start developing content and applications, which is ultimately, of course, when the hardware gets there, what you're going to need. So, I like writing about true things because you could not make them up. I mean, could you make up the Zuckerberg Musk cage match? I mean, I guess, we see science fiction movies all the time, like Iron Man, and, Musk really, that's the only way you can really think about him at this point. And, he's fighting with one of the other richest oligarchs in the world, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, if I could make this stuff up, I would, but I can't. I can only report or at least talk about what's happening around us.
Yeah. I see. No, it's great to report about an industry that has so many insane people. I mean, it's just a gift. I wonder, though, how you do that, Charlie. I wonder because you're always a step ahead. You're always an inch ahead of everything. And you still take time to process, to analyze, and to make these predictions that you just said are often hitting it the right way, looking back. So in your day-to-day, on like a Friday like today, how do you make sure you stay on top of things? Like, what do you do in the morning when everybody else, like normal people, get up and brush their teeth? Like, what do you do to keep up with everything?
I read for 5 hours a day, 4 hours a day, always taking notes. So it's very easy to do when you're reading online to, organize the content. And then I just reuse that content or refer to that content when I write the column on Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon. So when people say, how long does it take to write your column? Well, it takes, probably 2.5 hours, but it took me 40 hours to gather all the content that it takes me 2.5 hours to write, 800 words about.
You just said it's easy to gather content and take notes. I find that the opposite. I find it very hard to gather and organize content and take notes. How do you do it? What is your secret tool?
It's just a lifelong discipline. I think my ability to do that is actually what helped me be an effective creative executive, both at Disney and then in subsequent corporate jobs. Although I will say I hated my corporate jobs. I never liked managing people. And I'm sure there are lots of people who did not like being managed by me. But, so when I could leave the corporate world, I did. It's funny, though, I missed a lot of those relationships later and relationships like them, and I wanted to get them back. And that turned out to be very hard because I do think the most impactful things that I've done, I did within a community of other people. I didn't do them by myself. So, kind of ironically, I ended up by myself, and I still am working for myself, and it's suboptimal. I get the most out of working with people like Ted and Roni who do the podcast with me. I mean, you've got to keep bringing in outside ideas and fresh ideas into your thinking. That's the benefit of the in-person office.
But still, how do you do it? Do you like have a Google Doc and you copy and paste? Do you have an endless list of bookmarks? Do you have a notepad? Like, how do you do it?
That's how I do it. I, read an article, oh, this could be relevant, and I forward it to the email box of the podcast. And then that email box also has a bunch of Google alerts for keywords like virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And I just go through that, cutting and pasting into I don't use all of it, right? I just use the relevant parts. And so that's what takes the longest amount of time. And then I have things to say about each story, what I think it means, what are its implications. For example, Roblox is coming to the Oculus Quest. I don't know how much you've talked about the Quest or VR, but the Oculus Quest, they've sold about 20 million of these VR headsets, primarily there for gaming. They've had it's a great headset. They've got lots of great software, and they have a huge churn problem because after a few months, people put them away and they don't go back. They still prefer their console games. So anyway, Roblox is coming to VR. It's coming to the Quest headset. It's the biggest VR platform. They're introducing the Quest 3. Hopefully that will help them. They focused on games. We can go into that. I'm not sure that was the best strategy for them. But we'll see. Roblox is coming to the Quest, which is great. But what about its biggest? Meta has spent $1 billion building Horizon Worlds, which is their social place, and it's really kind of a failure that's been overrun by 10-year-olds. And now they're introducing Roblox. Where are those 10-year-olds going to go when they have a choice? But there's still some unknowns, right? What are the building tools? What are the economics? Are they still using Robux? So there's a lot we don't know yet about Roblox VR, but there are a lot of cuts at it, just as there are a lot of cuts at this week's news about the strikes partly over AI, and so Elon Musk fighting back against Threads, which downloaded 130 million times, and Elon is still the richest man in the world. And he could lose Twitter and it really wouldn't matter to him. But Twitter has 450 million users. He said he wants to turn it into X, which he just launched as a WeChat everything app. So, he's, maybe looks like he's taking it on the chin, but the cage match has many rounds left. So they will provide entertainment for years to come as they pillage the world economy.
And just hearing you talk, Charlie, thank you. This was basically This Week in XR in a nutshell. You just did a news overview of everything that's going on, and there's so many questions to follow from that. Anne wrote in the chat she's still hearing the choruses from Lion King. We'll talk about that in a minute. And John, aka the Quote Bot, just brought up something from about reading. Why bother reading? Why not just download all the known knowledge directly into your brain? Let Elon Musk implant a chip and so on. So what technology that's next are you most excited about right now? What is something that you already spent time on that we don't even know is around the corner?
Well, like everybody else in the world, I've been trying to download as much as possible about AI and pack it into my brain. Because if I don't do that, I'm scared that I'll be irrelevant. My public speaking business, which was booming during the metaverse craze, as you know, my first book, which was written in 2017 and came out on the first day of 2018, was called Charlie Fink's Metaverse. So that really got a nice jolt when everybody was trying to figure out what the metaverse was in 2021 and 2022. But now here we are in 2023, and the metaverse is kind of discredited. It is in the classic trough of disillusion from the Gartner hype cycle. And we'll see if it crawls out of that primordial ooze. I always thought using a made-up word from science fiction to describe 3D virtual worlds was a mistake, because it is so imprecise, because it is a made-up word, So anyway, I need to make myself relevant to artificial intelligence. So
what does that mean, though? Do you learn how to prompt, how to code, or what do you do?
Yes, I'm going to learn enough so that I can teach a college course introducing students to generative AI and how to make content using generative AI. That is exactly what I am learning.
And you just mentioned the strike. So
Yes.
it all happened over the last 24 hours.
Well, the actors' strike, the writers' strike's been going on for several months.
Yes, that it really, I think that the new combination is kind of historic, that the actors and the writers
This hasn't
together.
Yeah, there hasn't been a strike of this, a multi-union strike of this scale since 1960.
And I found something interesting that was sort of like compiling some news on the strike in the New York Times, because it said it is not only about money, it is also about fear of AI taking over script writing and acting. What do you think about that?
Well, I think everybody is always afraid of the unknown. So let us separate for a second in terms of the concerns that people in the union have are not focused on AI. They are focused on the expanding media universe and their inability to benefit from that. They're suffering from the fact that there are shorter seasons. There are more shows, but the hiatus for people on those shows is longer and longer. So it could be 2 years between your last day of work and your next day of work on that show. Writers have a concern because there are lower number of shows per season, often, as low as 3. So I think there's, most actors are just middle-class people trying to make a living. And so that, and meanwhile, you've got the production companies and the studios saying, oh, we're going broke, even though everybody knows they're also making billions of dollars. So it's a very, very, there's plenty of money to go around. At least that's the view of the writers and the actors. Now, there's another problem that is brewing with AI, right? So, for example, it'd be silly to do a crowd scene today with real actors. Right? You can make that up in a video game engine, which is what we use to make AAA video games, and you could insert that in that scene using special effects, either real-time special effects or post-special effects, which is traditionally the way it's been done. And that is instead of using real actors. But those actors don't have speaking roles. I think that the fear is, right, if I uploaded and I trained a large language model on every episode ever made of Friends, and then came to it and said, I want a episode where these two characters hook up and then realize they made a huge mistake. And then it will then generate that script. And after you go through a couple of iterations of that script with it, just through prompts, you can tell it to go ahead and produce it. And then come back 24 hours later, and here is, a 22-minute episode of Friends. So could that be done photorealistically? No way, not even close today. Forget about it. Okay, so people are not going to be making episodes of Friends that way. But they could be writing the scripts, right? They could be reducing the amount of manpower needed. So writers want a guaranteed number of writers to be used on a show, right? I don't think you can any more than you can tell college students they can't use AI. You're not going to tell writers that they can't use AI, but writers want to make sure that there are still seats in the room for them, even if they're using AI, to assist them in writing the script, which is the way it should be, because AI is a tool. Also, by the way, most AI content that gets made is not good. It takes a real artist and an artist's imagination to prompt the correct things in order to build something that has artistic merit. And the things that my students build using these exact same tools and, our student level work. And, when a director like Eugene Chung of Penrose Studios, who made Alumet, as well as many other terrific 3D VR films, when he did his prompts, he said an elf and an orc are breaking up in a 1950s diner in iambic pentameter. And it is one of the most brilliant 1 minute you'll ever see. And he made that on a ski lift in Park City, just using, his smartphone. So there is something to be feared from creators in the democratization of technology. And that has always been the case. You're never going to stop that, right? I mean, when have we ever stopped using technology because there might be unforeseen consequences or even foreseen consequences, right? Hey, cars are going to kill the planet. Oh, let's stop using cars. Did that happen? No. We would rather kill ourselves than do that.
And just mentioned in the chat that the future of this, though, is scary to her. Is it scary to you as well?
No, I'm scared of men with better tools. I'm scared. Men are apes with guns, right? We are not that many I mean, think about it. Up until like the 17th century, men lived as they had for millennia, right? Your ancestors had the same ropes and pulleys we had in the 16th century. They had the same shovels. They had the same hoes. They used horses. They, did animal husbandry, agriculture. Didn't change for, 400,000 generations. And then when it did start to change, imagine, that's why I say we are apes with guns. We are really, those people were primitive people. So look at how far we've come, but, yet our characters and our impulses have not taken us as far as science. So that's, what Albert Einstein also said, that's what he was afraid of. He's not afraid of science. He's afraid of men. And I think that is, with the tools becoming as powerful as they are, and with there being so many unforeseen consequences that can be exploited by bad actors, that is terrifying to me. Bad actors with better tools. We're about to be living in a world awash. We're already in a world awash with information and content, and it's about to get a lot worse because of AI. So yeah, that's what I worry about. AI taking over the world. Why would it do that? What would the benefit to AI be to do that? So I don't know. I mean, I don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about AI that is got cognition. It does a good job of simulating cognition. And for some things, that's good enough. We'll see. I mean, I'm excited actually to see how the technology is going to develop. Clearly, it's going to be incredibly disruptive, just like the internet was. But it could take, maybe everybody says, oh, it's going to be different this time. Maybe it never is. Everybody says it's going to be different this time, and it never is. So I'm going to say, yes, AI changes everything, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, it'll become clearer how that's going to play out. But I wouldn't be buying a isolated island to hide from AI when it tries to, destroy man for being evil 10 years from now. That's a science fiction movie, but that's what people have in their heads. I mean, we've been demonizing AI for 100 years. So this is the Frankenstein story all over again. Oh my God, you have the technology that creates life and death. How are you going to control it? You can't control it. It's going to kill you. So is that the story of AI? I doubt it. But look at the internet. I mean, maybe it is going to kill us. I don't know.
Gosh, it's so hard to interview you, Charlie, because everything you say is so interesting, and you just don't stop.
I know, and I run at the mouth.
Why does the show need a moderator?
It's a college professor, occupational health. You ask a question, and then I just give you a 20-minute lecture.
I want to highlight also what John Bott, as he's now officially called, just put in the chat, apes don't read philosophy. Yes, they do. They just don't understand it. A quote from A Fish Called Wanda. Thank you, John, as always. And
I love quotes. Keep them coming.
Yes, we already have a thread of Charlie Fink quotes in the chat as well. So just wanted to highlight that. Also wanted to welcome John Gress to the room. Welcome to Remote Daily. You're in for something special today. This show does not need a host. It still has one. So I'll try and ask another question, Charlie, because I also actually wanted to go back into your own journey a little bit. 1992, you joined Tim Disney's pioneering location-based VR company. So back then already you were on a track that you are, living off today, and then came up with this idea for The Lion King. And you told us many people could have had this idea, humble as you are, but you were in the right position to sell it to Disney. So you were the gatekeeper back then, and you did it. And I think it took you a long time. You told us preparing for today, it took you years, but you did it. Do you feel like the message of this movie?
I'm sorry, just a minute.
Uh-oh. Oh, there he is.
Ah.
So this is getting interesting, everyone. So I just want to describe what just happened. So a guest who does not need a host just left the show to yell at someone else. I think that's a first. And Leonardo and Dario, I told you before, this is a special show and we might need some music at some point. This would probably be a good point for some music. Are you still here with us?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
It was Medicaid. It's insulin, and it's 110 degrees outside. So I had to grab it right away and bring it inside. And the guy who was dropping it off was frantically emailing and texting me. So I'm sorry, my wife is not here today. It's just me and the dog. So apologies. This is a classic work from home moment.
Absolutely, and you brought a lot of suspense to the room because you jumped up and then yelled at someone. And it was just great. And
so I was yelling at the dog to shut up so I could talk to the guy.
If you have a sound, Eleanor and Dario, that could resemble or at this moment or help us process this, please play now. And then afterwards, I'll ask Charlie about Disney. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being here. And Charlie, let me ask you this question. Lion King, does it still resonate today? Are you still fond of the message of this movie?
I'll tell you the whole Lion King story, Felix, because everybody loves this story, and I'll answer your question as I tell it. I was in charge in 1987 through 1991 in developing animated movies for Walt Disney Pictures. And, when I entered the animation department, it was not considered a very important department at that time. And, my job was to help find stories for new animated movies. We were already working on The Little Mermaid, right? So what's the next Little Mermaid? And we figured out Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin were low-hanging fruit. We wanted to do another boy movie like Aladdin. Right, all of our titles are princesses. So I looked back through the catalog and said, well, Bambi was a boy movie. Maybe we should do Bambi like with African animals and African music. So my boss liked it. And so we went in the Monday morning creative meeting, I pitched it to Jeff Katzenberg, who is the head of the studio. Just as I said to you, Bambi in Africa, African lions. And it is the story. Bambi is fundamentally the story of the son replacing the father, right? It is the one true story. It is the story of the Bible. It's every story that's ever been written about a man. And, Bambi starts with the great stag overlooking the forest and the thicket where his son is born. And it ends with Bambi on that cliff overlooking that same thicket. And the great stag steps back into the mists of history. And, that's the Lion King. And, that never changed. From that moment I pitched it. Everything else changed about it. Now, am I a creative genius for coming up with that idea? I don't think so. I was a movie executive. I was taught the, just like, but completely different than formula that William Goldman cited in his famous book about screenwriting. So, it's just like Bambi, but with lions, right? So, that was just in the air, and it seemed obvious at the time. And it's funny, Katzenberg said, after I pitched it, if you could figure out why Bambi eats the other animals, that might be a picture. So that began the long journey of developing it. And, was it Hamlet? Was it not Hamlet? It didn't really matter because it's fundamentally about the son replacing the father. And whatever that journey is, in a way, is secondary to that bigger theme. So that's the whole Lion King story. And of course, they rewarded me for that. They recognized it by promoting me to a VP. So I showed up there as a 27-year-old junior executive. 2 years later, I was the youngest creative VP At the studio, they moved me over to live action as my reward. And there at live action, I wore a sign on my back called former animation superstar Kick Here. And they gave me all the talking dog movies. I supervised Homeward Bound, which they blamed me for making a tremendous failure and running way over budget. And it has since become the studio's most valuable franchise and generating $1.5 billion in revenue. So I guess I was a terrible executive. Anyway, I had a lifeboat to jump into, which was Tim Disney's VR company. And so that's how I got in. I mean, I felt very strongly at that time that personal computers were going to replace movies as the center of American culture. And people at Disney thought I had lost my mind.
Here we are. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And I want to bring us back to...
Yeah, I want to just add one thing about that story. In a way, I feel bad telling it. I know people are really curious about it, and it is something to be proud of. But what I am always haunted by, there's a famous line from Shakespeare, I am mocked by my achievements, right? Because for the past 30 years, I've been trying to have another success like that. And I feel like I'm just going to keep chasing it, but you only get one at bat like that. And it was because of the context and the access that I had, not because of my creative genius. You know, if somebody of reasonable intelligence had done that job at that moment in history with those people around them, then it is likely they would have come up with an idea, if not that idea, one substantially similar. I mean, the one true story is the one true story that everybody knows and doesn't know that they know.
I would say by any measures of success that I know, you are very successful. And maybe it's just upon you to define success differently today.
I never have. The one thing it took me, it took me 40 years to figure out the thing that I really wanted was to be relevant. The thing that I really wanted was to be the person who was worthy of being on your show and of being heard. And, I wish I had known that about myself sooner. I wish I had known about that when I was 40. Known that about myself.
This is fantastic. I think we could just, make this an extra large session and go on.
This is the thing about being 63. You've got a lot of content.
I want to come back to a question, make a hard cut, come back to a question from Brandon, because Brandon actually asked about music. You produced over 30, if I'm not mistaken, award-winning off-Broadway shows, festivals, documentary features in just a decade, in the aughts and the tens of this millennium. And you were the chairman, also the German. I mean, you're in a room with a German right now. The chairman of the New York Music Festival, fantastic, which is best known as the incubator of, a lot of Broadway hits, actually, Next to Normal, Title of Show, and so on. So Brandon is asking, as a musician and music festival leader, what is your take on the metaverse being a venue for experiencing music or AR supplementing live in-person experiences? What do you think, Charlie? How is the future of music going to converge with XR and Web3?
I actually think the metaverse is an opportunity for people to rediscover the lost art, or to rediscover the art of live performance, which most people do not have access to, can't afford. They aren't proximate to it. So I think the metaverse is going to hugely democratize the art of theater. It hasn't yet. When will it happen? When will the technology be good enough for you to feel like you're sitting in a Broadway theater? I don't know. That is all theoretical, but that's something I'm really excited about. And I've been following developments in that area closely because lots of people are trying to do that. So that's one. Number two is augmented reality and live music in the metaverse, right? Because you could have an augmented reality concert. I mean, the Gorillaz already did it, a few months ago with the help of Google's AR team. And it's quite amazing. You can find it on YouTube. So I think that AR and live music are a natural combination, and we'll see more and more of it. Snap is already doing it. Niantic, the Pokemon Go company, does it. And I think it's going to be a really big thing and continue to grow and will have a big role in the development of augmented reality. I also think live music in the metaverse will be a thing, right? Not everybody can go to the Sphere in Las Vegas and pay $800 to see U2, but you could stream that live volumetrically into VR or the metaverse or however you want to characterize it, Facebook Live, Twitch. And so that is going to give, so yes, you'll have to pay $800 to see U2 or Hamilton live, but you can pay $20 and see it remotely. So it's going to democratize that art and that live art and make it much more accessible. I think that's actually always been the great potential of the technology and remains, it's just not good enough yet to simulate that.
Daily. So, Charlie, creative work, you're a creative and you have been all your life. And you told us preparing for today, you said, nowadays, this is another quote for Avelli, who was collecting your quotes in the chat here. Nowadays, as a creative, you'll pivot your whole life. You can have 40 bosses or 40 clients. So help us please understand that. What does it mean to be a creative today versus when you started in the late 80s?
Well, the whole digital landscape didn't exist then, right? The means of production were very expensive and cumbersome and limited to Hollywood. You didn't have a distribution platform like TikTok today. So it's really, really an apples to oranges comparison, right? The way someone would be discovered as an actor, would be through agents and in-person auditions and being in theater productions so that they could be found, right? Or be a stand-up comedian. You'd have to get out there in the world, right? And you could only perform. That is what you did to be discovered as a performer. Today, if you want to be discovered as a performer, you better be able to write, direct, produce, edit, score, do the titles and distribution and you have to be a whole production company. You have the means of production, but you don't have anybody to help you. So if you don't become good at all those things, whatever your niche is, whether it's, knitting, guitar playing, or reciting Shakespeare, whatever your need is, now you need to be, your niche is, now you need to be, your own television production company, and you have your own distribution platform, which of course you need to become the marketing director of. My son does this for a living. He is a sports influencer. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers and he makes content every day. He was a performer. Then he went into the insurance business. Then he went into the real estate business and the pandemic happened. He was in commercial real estate and he started playing golf. And we were all like, well, what the hell, is the guy ever going to get another job? And he turned that into his job. He started giving lessons to his friends and filming that and, chopping it up and putting it on social media. And before you know it, the guy's got hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. And this is true of every performer. If you want to be on TV today, you either have to come up through reality television as a charismatic contestant, or you have to, be a YouTube or a Instagram influencer, filming your own comedy routines until you could do them for somebody else, So that's a very, very different world where people used to have scripts. Now you can't get anybody to read your script. You have to, everything is done via email. It's so easy to ghost somebody on email. A personal visit is harder thing to delete. So it's just changed so much because of that technology. It's almost unrecognizable by me. And my son from time to time asks me for advice, and I always see in his eyes, I'm sorry, I asked this guy, his information is out of date. It is out of date. I feel embarrassed to say that because I'm supposed to understand what's going on in the world of tech. But as far as the entertainment industry goes, and particularly the part of the industry where people are trying to break in, I don't know. But what I am saying is, by giving you this long story in this example, he had to become his own company. There was no company that was going to hire him. There was no producer that was going to discover him. There was no agent who was going to present him. You have to do all that yourself. And then you're going to go find clients. And even if you are a producer, every job you have to keep moving on from in order to move up. And by the way, your employers have no long-term attachment to you in return. So, the relationship of employers and employees has changed. Honestly, the relationship of college professors to students has changed.
I think for the next show you're on, we will invite your son as well. What is his Instagram or TikTok? Where can we find him?
Here, I'll put it right here in the chat. At Dave Fink Golfs.
At Dave Fink Golfs. No questions asked. He did it.
Yeah.
And what an impressive story. The last question I wanted to ask you, Charlie, is you teach, as we heard before, Chapman, Arizona State University, and you actually even turned one of your classes into a book, which is a topic very near and dear to us, remote collaboration, which came out in 2020, came through researching with the class on alternatives to Zoom during the pandemic. It's so great what you do when you start creating with the community. You always share it with everyone. I love that. I love that it's possible to learn so much from what you're doing every day through all the channels that you're visible on. And it's a really very much appreciated that you take the time to be here today. Your students, though, what are your students worried about? Like this generation that you just talked about with your own son. What is...
Well, I think we have raised...
Think about right now.
We have raised a generation that does not learn the way that we learned, and we have to catch up to them. How are they going to be engaged? How are they going to absorb the course content? Reading books and talking about them. Watching films and talking about them, which is our tradition. That's how everybody on this call went through a higher education, right? I was trying to, make you a critical thinker and make you someone who could express ideas on paper and verbally. And that is not the education that I found that students want or need. And that is not how they are going to learn. They're just not going to. So this is an example of, there's a famous saying, which is, when you fight against something and you can't change it, maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's reality. And so I think that what we have is a reality where students need to learn visually. They need to learn in smaller chunks. They don't want to read a bunch of stuff. They'd rather watch 4 hours of media than read for 1 hour. And so I've found that, I've gone in my journey as a academic or a teacher in the past 5 years from sort of demanding that they learn like me, especially now since post-pandemic, having to kind of revise the way I organize and teach my class because I can't do it the way I want to do it, and have the kind of success that I want to have in my outcomes. And I think it's just a very different world and very different kinds of students. In that case, in the case of the book, we were all completely freaked out about the pandemic. We were always on Zoom, and part of our thought, well, is this it? Is this Zoom? This is the future of work, is Zoom. So, the premise was, well, there must be other platforms out there. And indeed, there were 100 other platforms out there. But Zoom won. Why? It certainly wasn't about VR, because VR was just not widely distributed, nor was it particularly ready for its close-up. So that was kind of inconclusive. I still think it's inconclusive. VR is a great solution when we want to be together, but we have to be apart. And there could be another pandemic. Certainly, there are many experts that predict one. So you never know. VR may be more widely distributed, and those headsets that are in drawers suddenly will all get whipped out and start being used for, practical, real, and important purposes, not for just playing games.
Yeah. And Charlie, I want to thank you so much for teaching us today and for sharing parts of your experience and your wisdom with us. There's so much to learn from you, and the relevance that you worry about so much, I think, is palpable for everyone in the room. Whatever we poke you on, we learn something from you, and you're always this inch ahead that is so fresh to hear about. and so thoughtful when you explain where you're coming from to something and why you're going somewhere. And what you just said is also rings true for Remote Daily. You know, when you look about the climate changes that are happening in the world, and when you look about XR and virtual learning, this room that we are right in, this is where a lot of interactions are continue to go to happen. And I think Zoom helped us in the beginning because they also invested so much in audio. The fact that we have a live show with live music, Zoom is by way the best platform to do that. And with guests like you, we will always have curious minds to come back to the room and wanna chat with us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Great to meet you all.
This is Remote Daily.